Okay. Call this meeting to order at 5:35 p.m. We apologize for the delay, technical difficulties. So any declaration of interest or general interest, please declare it now. Mr. Olkey? Okay. I will read the public meeting introduction so that everybody understands how this meeting will go and purpose. Personal information collected at this public hearing is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments are collected and form part of the minutes which are available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning. Purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant or staff, council members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions for clarification or for further information. The meeting then will be open to the public for comments and questions. When you speak, please provide your name and address for recording in the minutes. All comments should be directed to the chair or myself of the meeting. The applicant will be provided the opportunity to address public questions once all members of the public have made their submissions. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. A public meeting is held to gather public opinion. If a person or public body would have the ability to appeal the decision of the council to the local planning appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the township before the bylaw is passed, the person or the public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. So with that, we will move forward to the first application on the agenda this evening, Z-2020-008 Farms, 236 Ivy Lane Road. So we'll look to our associate planner, Tom Fair, to give the overview.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can everyone hear me okay?
Can't hear you.
Can't hear me?
Tom, can you try it again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right. So this application is a zoning application to change the zoning of the subject property at 236 Ivy Lee Road to a site-specific rural residential zone to permit uses accessory to the dwelling located at 251 Ivy Lee Road. The uses would include parking, open storage, gardening, landscaping, and accessory buildings and structures. The site-specific zone would include provisions to regulate the location and setbacks for storage and accessory buildings. As part of the application, the applicant is proposing to regularize a 19.3 square meter workshop and a 12.1 square meter two-story deck, which includes a staircase and landing areas to access the second story of the workshop and a 5.9 square meter storage building. A minor variance was previously granted for the structure, and additional decking is proposed through this application. So turning now to comments. The CRCA, MTO, and St. Lawrence Park Commission indicate no objection to the application. There were 5 public comments received. 2 letters stated no objection. They support the application as the property has a long history of use that the applicant is proposing. 1 letter stated their only concern with the application was regarding the open storage use. And this letter also stated that the building should be relocated to meet the required setback. 2 letters of objection were received citing concerns regarding open storage, the size of the structure, and proximity to the property line. So that's a summary of the comments we received to date on this application.
Sorry, is that the end of your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Sorry, we had a delay there for a second.
Hi.
I'm wondering if we have anyone on the line who's looking to speak for this particular attendees. So I would assume that Mr. LaCroix, Mr. Burns, trying to think who else would be on there in regards to
I can't see because there's no, because you can't see. I can't see from the blinding
one
light. No, I already have like the blinding in my eye. I can't see. Sorry. So do you want to let Mr. Burns go first?
Should we let Mr. Burns go first or later? At the end, I would think. Yeah, we should let. So, do we know? Please raise your hand. If you are in the attendees, please raise your hand if you're here in regards to the Burns application so that we can get through, through you. Thank you. That works. Good. Okay. So we will recognize,
Patricia, do you
yeah, we'll just go in order. So Patricia, we're going to recognize you when we've unmuted you. On our end, so you may speak for or against this application. If you have made a submission to us in writing, can you please just hit the highlights of your submission, as there's a number of people on this call who would like to speak to the application. Thank you.
Yes, I am for this application.
So are there any comments you'd like to make, or have you provided something in writing to us, Patricia?
Our lot is right in front of Mr. Burns' building. My mother is right across from his building, and we see no problem with this building.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. We'll move forward to Nancy Catholic. Nancy, we're just unmuting you, and if you could please identify yourself and your address, and whether you're for or against this application, please.
She has to unmute herself.
And there we go, you've unmuted yourself. Wait, you go.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Kapik. I am just speaking on behalf of my mother, Beverly McDonald, who has a long history of residence at 245 Ivy Lee Road. She doesn't have internet or email, so I've sent a written letter on her behalf reflecting her feelings and opinions. She has no objection to the rezoning or the amendment to the original building that is looking for an expanded scope. She fully supports the application.
Thank you very much. So just to, you're a bit muffled, so I will just repeat that you're in favor of the application and you submitted a written letter on behalf of your mother. Can you state your mother's name for the record, please?
Beverly McDonald.
Beverly McDonald, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to the next person on the line. Paul Ladas. We're unmuting you, Mr. Ladas, and you can speak as soon as you unmute yourself. There we go.
Thanks for the opportunity, but I don't have any additional comments beyond the written submission. Thanks.
Okay, so you made a written submission and those notes have been circulated, or if they haven't been circulated, will be circulated prior to that community council. I believe that's all we have on the line who are.
One other I noticed there, Patricia further down, she actually has a report here. She doesn't put her hand up, but it's there.
So she hasn't put her hand up. Patricia, or the name, Caprian? Ms. Caprian, would you like to speak for or against this application? We're unmuting you now. If you want to unmute yourself, you can speak for or against. I'm not seeing you unmute yourself, but if you've provided written comments, maybe taken into consideration. Oh, there you are. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Hello?
I can hear you.
You can hear me, yes. I believe I do not know whether you have received my letter,
Yes,
I did in a letter in which I have made my my stand clear that I, hope that you will not accept this application. There were a few irregularities in it. We live right, whereas Mrs. Beverly is living on the other side of the street and never has any view of the property that's in question. We live right next to it, and it borders right on our property. So it's a very different situation, I think. And I am, as I said in my letter, I grew up around farms. My father's a naturalist. He also kept bees. The applicant and I used to talk about bees. We used to exchange our feelings about growing vegetables. I was very excited when he did make a garden, and everything was fine. I exchanged cookies with him. He exchanged wine with us, telling us that he was very happy that we put up with his mess, and promised us that within 3 months it would all be gone. None of it happened. I just feel that we moved out here to spend the last third of our life, hopefully, here in nature. I'm a nature child. I love nature. But then what happened really is that when the applicant sold his house in Mallory Town, he moved here and started to just bring everything over here and gave us false promises that he would clear it. And always saying, next month, I'm still doing this, I'm still doing that. But nothing really happened. And finally, we did go to the city. Yes, it's true. It was our last resort, because he would just give all of us, Paul, Mr. Ledas, our neighbor, my husband and myself, he gave us these false promises. And so we did go to the city. And then, as the bylaw states, it was supposed to be a non-buildable property. And nothing had ever been built there. And then the applicant brought this old shack that he got from someone, and he brought it over here about 5 years ago. And he put it directly on the line, and I was very upset about that. It didn't really belong there. He had so much space in the back that he could have put it, but no, he put it right directly there. Then the old truck of his son's was there. It stood there for 3 or 4 years. Every time in the summer, it wasn't too bad, but in the winter, when I wanted to get out of my garage, I couldn't get out. Sometimes there was not enough room even. So we asked him to please move the old truck. It wasn't in use. It was just standing there. And then all the other things came, all the things that I mentioned in my letter. And then the city, or the township, made him finally move some of the things. And now the applicant is applying to bring everything back again. And he's holding all of this on his dock space. And even in front of, next to the street, in front of the fence that he built. He's not trying to get along with us. You can't believe me, when we moved here 21 years ago, I invited the neighbors. I had the coffee and tea. I had baked cakes. I tried everything. And they just don't want to accept us. They won't accept us.
Comments, Trisha? We do have your written submission on the docket as well, so that will be circulated along with the application.
I have a
Board ask a question.
Sorry, I'll recognize Councillor Olkey, who has a question.
Yes. Frau Patricia, I did not see your last name fully printed, so I'm sorry I don't have it. But there seems to be two issues here. You speak to irregularities in the submission, and then you also seem to have a dispute on neighborhood standards. Those are two distinct things. What were the specific irregularities? Please and thank you.
I'm going to recognize the planner so that she can speak to that.
Thank you through your worship. I'll just point out that this is the public meeting this evening, so we do have all of the written submissions. There are specifics around property standards that staff have been working on the property with respect to. So we don't want to get into different matters beyond the zoning at this point. However, we will address what we can to summarize it in the comprehensive report when we bring a recommendation forward.
Thank you, Madam Planner. Does that suffice for you, Councillor Oakey? Okay. Thank you. Okay, are there any other individuals that have come to this meeting to Mr. Lacroix, I think? We'll allow Mr. Lacroix to speak to this for or against. Please state your name and your address, Mr. Lacroix.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Yes. Okay. My name is François Lacroix. You've just heard my wife, Patricia. We live at 246 Abilene Road. The property is adjacent to the applicant's dwelling on the water and the property that surrounds the three sides of the vacant lot, which is the subject of the application. My submission is not based on personal issues or animosity, it's based on facts. The claim that is the claimant, applicant, basis is false premise of grandfathering. Actually, the house, the dwelling that he mentions was indeed built in the 1950s, but it was a summer cottage. So if he's any grandfathering, it should be from having a summer cottage. And the summer cottage doesn't need tons of storing. The vacant lot is entirely surrounded by residential properties that are well maintained and landscaped. The rezoning would be against the spirit and the letter of the township official plan. And the rezoning would affect the value of the 4 surrounding properties. In the last 20 years, more than 34 of the approximately 70 private dwellings on Ivy have been rebuilt or have had major renovation. Ivy has become an even more beautiful waterfront village. Residents take pride in their village. This can be seen especially this year when residents have taken over the maintenance and improvement of the entrance to Ivy that the township could not maintain. To my knowledge, there is no open storage zone in Ivy. According to official plan, it's supposed to be residential and commercial. I hope the council will maintain its position on the future of Ivy and refuse the application. I have sent you a submission that I hope you will look and see the false things that have been put in there. I mentioned the fact that it's a summer cottage. I mentioned the fact that it has never been used for storage until 2013. And I support this with photographs of satellite pictures. We've also taken picture, Paula Das and I, from way back, and it was never used because it was a summer cottage. It was not the first family dwelling, a year-round thing. It was just a summer cottage. The building, as you'll see in there, the applicant has already put 2 huge balconies that increase the footprint on the property by about 77%. And it's already there. He's asking forgiveness from you to approve this along with storing. If the fence that he put up on his lakefront property is any indication of what it would be like if he had a fence like this on a vacant lot, it would look absolutely horrendous. I'm assuring you that it would definitely affect the value of the 4 properties surrounding it.
Thank you.
And it would be across, you know, not in line with the official plan. When we moved here, it was a vacant lot. Bylaws said that it would be a vacant lot. We would like it to stay that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lacroix. Are there any other hands raised for that application? Mr. Burns, so I think we'll allow Mr. Burns to speak to his application, and then we will ask for questions from the councilors. Mr. Burns, would you like to speak?
And can you hear me? Yeah, I submitted a lot of documents earlier on. As you may or may not be aware, the property in question that Mr. Lacroix now owns was actually my family's farm, 100-acre farm that went back to the Reynolds Road. My family has been in the Lansdowne area for 180 years. And when I was born, and that was our farm, that was a working farm. I know every inch of that farm. And when my father elected to sell the farm to Tom and Ruby Sirtwell that were on Hill Island so they could bring their kids over here and live on the mainland, my father retained that lot as to coincide with the river property. So I've spent the majority of my life, 70 years, using this property and the farm property. And there's, as I've identified, that lot was used because this is the most dangerous section of the Ivy Lee Road. There's no parking spots available or anything like that. That lot was used for parking, and you know, back in the day there were little boats, you know, they were little 14, 15-foot cedar strip boats, 5.5 horsepower motors. Well, things have advanced over time. And Garth McDonald and Beverly McDonald that inherited that property from Lyle Moxley. Garth McDonald, who is deceased now, he used to store he had 2 vehicles. He actually used to store his car there over the winter. So Mr. Lacroix has been here for 20 some years. I've been here all my life. My childhood was on this river and this property, and I'd like to leave this property boots first. So a lot of the stuff Mr. Lacroix has brought up pertains to, I don't know what. He's trying to incorporate a lot of things here. In regards to his wife saying, I gave them wine. Yes, I gave them 2 bottles of wine at one point in time because they mowed the grass for me because my lawnmower was broken down. I thought it was a neighborly thing to do. That's why I gave it to them. As far as cookies go, I don't know about cookies. I don't recall any cookies. And they made note that there was no building on that property. As a matter of fact, yes, there was a building And a tree somehow got cut down and crushed the building. And I went to the township at the time, talked to the building inspector at the time, and he said that I could rebuild that building plus 30%. So with everything that was going on in my life at the time, you know, some things take time. I'm by myself. I am 70 plus years old. I try to do what I can. And I just wanted to live a simple life here with no chaos, and the neighbors that I grew up with and respected, and carry on my life. As you're well aware from the photographs, you can see that I was inflicted with the wrath of the St. Lawrence River. And, you know, he makes reference to a lot of stuff. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I don't live on a hill. I don't have a large amount of acreage. I'm just trying to make do with a simple life. and try to be peaceful with everybody around here. I think that's been identified. So I've worked diligently with the township for the past couple of years, and I've as your director will attest to, that I have done everything that the township has asked to make everything cleaned up as far as possible over the time frame. And there hasn't been any concerns with that regard. And I'd like to say that, you know, we're talking about 236 here and that lot. Mr. Lacroix has introduced a lot of other stuff that, other than this being my primary residence, you know, I don't know what to tell you, you know.
Mr. Burns, maybe I'll stop you there and I'll ask if any of the councilors have any questions for yourself or for the planner in regards to the application. Any, Deputy Mayor, I'll recognize you and I'll recognize Councilor maybe after that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, can you make sure that your microphone is close to you when you go to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Burns. Do you have a relationship with the Hunts?
Is he asking me something?
You have a relationship with the Hunts.
With the Hunts?
Yeah, but
the Hunts in Ivy Lee,
yeah.
Or the Hunts in Rockport, or where?
And I can across the road from you.
Sorry?
Across the road from you.
There are no Hunts across the road from me.
Oh, okay. My mistake. Sorry.
Not a problem.
Do you have any further questions, Deputy Mayor? No. Okay, Councilor, maybe I'll ask you to turn your mic on and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I have a couple of questions. Again, talking about vehicles, if they're stored on the site, it should be in working order is my mind. It's a temporary storage, over winter or over the summer storage. Also, building permits, they were granted, I think, but were they granted for the additional stairway? And how close or is the setback feasible on the property? Again, we're holding all residents to a setback.
And understand.
There should be no exception here also. Perimeter screening, if there's anything for open storage, because I know that's also a hot topic here, and that it should have some sort of pleasant appearance, whether it be a covered boat or any other sort of issue. Certainly should not be look like a garage lot. I don't think anybody in IB would like that. Property standards are important, and we're trying to enforce that in all the boroughs and rural areas. So this area should also have that. Thank you.
Madam Planner, you want to speak to that? Go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. I just wanted to point out that we will take all of those comments under consideration and make sure that they're addressed when we bring forward a recommendation and through our review of the application.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate there's a difference between this application and property standards, and I do realize that there's some mingling of the two during this application, but the application is separate from the property standards issues that have been in the past or moving forward. So any further questions for Mr. Burns or the planner? And I'll recognize Councilor Burrell.
No, you don't need to. No, you just need to turn on your microphone.
Thank you to you, your worship. I was just curious about the wording here. The purpose would include parking, household of storage of household items. Is that regarding sort of an outdoor storage of any household items like washers, dryers? That one I find a little vague, and I don't understand how, and I know it's not property standards we're talking about, but that certainly opens that one up. Gardening, landscaping, accessory building, fine, but I'm a little concerned about that storage of household items. You could put them in a garage, which a lot of people do. I don't understand why we would want to codify the concept of storage of household items on property. Codify. Thank you.
Madam Planner, I'll let you speak to that.
The purpose and intent of the application is generally stated. The draft zoning amendment would limit what could be stored outside. As Mr. Burns indicated, he has very limited land base on the property where his home is for storage of anything. So in saying storage of household items, what we intended was anything that would be related to a single family residential use that you would store in your backyard. That being said, the draft bylaw attached to the report, just for information purposes, includes specific provisions around what outdoor storage would look like, the fact that it would need to be screened, set back from property lines, and all of those details. So we've heard all of the questions and comments tonight, and we'll make sure that they're addressed when we bring a recommendation forward.
Thank you.
Any further questions or concerns in regards to this application? I'll recognize Councilor Foley.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to our planner. Is it appropriate for me to ask, has there been any or what number of complaints regarding property standards? It seems to be the front running issue with this whole application.
Through you, Your Worship, I'm not able to get into the details of complaints around that, but I can tell you that if there are property standards concerns brought to our attention, we will follow up on.
Great, I thought as much. Thank you.
Any further questions? We have Nancy Kaftik. We only take comments once from individuals, so unfortunately I can't recognize her. Are there any questions for Mr. Burns or the plan going forward? Councilor Burrell, I'll recognize you again.
Thank you to again, Your Worship. Noticing that, am I correct in looking that there are the properties surrounded by access roads? There's one to the east and west. Am I correct in that assumption? And is there any chance that one of those wouldn't be necessary? Could one be with Mr. Burns, does he control those? And are they both necessary?
Madam Planner?
Through Your Worship, I don't know the specifics of the road that surrounds the property. It is a right of way, so I'm not sure what other properties may have access across that. So that's something that we would need to look into.
Any further questions for the planner or Mr. Burns? Seeing none, we'll move forward with the next application. And we thank everyone for their comments. No decisions are made this evening. This public meeting is held to gather public input. And we thank everyone who's attended in regards to the first application. Second application on the docket is Z 2020-009 Treanor 2065 Eden Road. And I'll ask Mr. Fair to speak to that application before we hear input from the public. Go ahead, Mr. Fair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this application will change the zoning of 20 65 Eden Grove Road to a site-specific rural zone, which would permit cabins for tourist rentals to be on the property. The proposed buildings at this time are an 18.5 square meter cabin, 4 35.6 square meter cabins, and a 31.2 square meter cabin, as well as a 24 square meter common building and washing station, as well as associated parking spaces for each cabin rental. I will say that this property is subject to an ongoing enforcement matter, which resulted in the subject application. The enforcement matter involved the use of the property being used for tourist rentals, and the owner is seeking to have the use permitted on the property. We received correspondence on this application. The CRCA, they are recommending deferral of the application at this time in order that a scoped EIS can be submitted and reviewed. They are recommending an environmental impact study is scoped to the areas of the development and focus on impacts to significant woodlands. The reason for this is that the development is in an area of potentially significant woodlands. The MTO indicated they have no comments. We have 5 letters from the public that were received, all stating concerns and objections to the application. A petition with 41 signatures from neighboring landowners was also submitted in objection to the application. So the letters received cite multiple concerns, including the impact the proposal will have on the environment, as well as changing the character of the residential area. There were concerns about community safety. A significant concern was tourists trespassing onto neighboring properties. Concerns also related to impacts on groundwater and a lack of appropriate servicing in general. Letters stated that they need to ensure adequate servicing, such as water and wastewater disposal for the application. Concerns also were cited regarding emergency access to the cabins and concerns about wildfire spreading from the tourist campfires and how a lack of servicing, particularly water, could increase this risk. So that's a summary of the letters and comments that were received on this application, which were provided to you today, Council.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I will ask that all those who are wishing to speak for or against this application, please raise your hand using it's at the bottom of the screen, and I will recognize you one by one. And then I'll just reiterate that there are no decisions being made this evening, but this is gathering of information so that our planning department can provide a recommendation to council in the future. So I have 2 people so far. I'll just allow people to find that icon. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand in regards to the application Z 2020-009 or 2065 Eden Grove Road. So I will recognize Mr. McMillan first, and then I have Carrie next. Go ahead, Mr. McMillan.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bob McMillan. I own the property that runs along basically the east side of the property at 1981 Eden Grove. I also own the property in front of 2065, which is 2046. Ongoing issues with this. This property, as stated, has been used for the last 3 or 4 years as a rental property. There's been multiple cabins built on the property without being permitted. I'm also a builder. This has been going on. This is an ongoing fight. As of 2 years ago, there was a garden shed, an Amish garden shed placed at the front of the property where an individual occupied it for over 8 months as he was living in it as a dwelling, which had no water, no outhouse, no nothing. Obviously, you know, a big issue when it comes to things like that. It was removed after the township was notified. I do believe there's an ongoing thing with a cottage that I don't know if everybody's aware of that just got tore down or is in process of getting tore down because it was placed on significant wetlands too close to it, which is very close to where all these proposed sites on the front of this property. I don't believe this is a very adequate or accurate description that was sent out to everybody as a plot plan, the proposed plot plan. That swamp actually continues right through to my property. It's very large. And I do believe there's setbacks on how far and how close they can be to water. And I can say that at least 3 of those, maybe even 4 of those properties would be within the 100-meter range. There's also properties that aren't marked on here that are also being used for rentals that are further back on the property that aren't showing on here that are there. The business obviously has been shut down. I see that you can't no longer book with Airbnb, but you know what I mean? It's a significant issue with me because I'm a hunter. I bought this property that belongs next to it. You know, I have groomed trails all through it. I have a lot of visitors throughout the winter, skiing, snowshoeing, you know, all that fun stuff through my property that's not permitted. I don't give access to it. You know, I kind of want to know because my son and I enjoy being out there and we do hunt, and it's I'm always cautious to know where my property lines are, but I don't know if there's people walking through, and I don't want there to be accidents in the future, especially with like increased traffic. You know, people are coming out. I do honestly think she's trying to do good to have people out in the nature and all that. But at the end of the day, they have to be on their own property, and there's no fences that are you know, there to stop. You know, if it goes through, I'd like to see, you know, high fences put up so that people are very visible that they're crossing property lines. But at the end of the day, we give access for 6 cottages or whatever the proposed is now, and they've already put up so many and done so much work so far. What happens after this proposal to just keep going ahead and keep expanding? You know, like I see like a class 3 septic. When did that get put in? Why would it got put in if it's just a dwelling? You know what I mean? It's gray water. What are we talking when it comes to gray water for these units? You know, gray water is not allowed in any circumstance. So, you know what I mean? There is a treatment system, but you know, issues like that, that's like I'm a builder and I just don't see how this can be accessible. What about soil tests for the existing cottages that have been put in use, that have been using outhouses that are close to these wetlands? Are they getting tested? Is there anything further on that? I don't know how much more I need to go on it, but it's a big concern of mine. I didn't buy a property to have a, you know, KOA next to it.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. I will recognize Carrie next. And Carrie, we've unmuted you, so you can go ahead. Please state your name and your address, please.
I am Carrie Griffin, and I will be living at 2125 Eden Grove Road. I did grow up at 1259 Marble Rock Road, along with my brother, his wife there at 1280 Marble Rock Road. We've had this plot of land on either side of Marble Rock Road, close to Eden Grove Road. We are 5th generation there. We have always enjoyed the land for farming and, of course, hunting. As Bob McMillan stated, a lot of us in the area do that. Ashley and I did put together the information, and we did contact the neighboring landowners to get their viewpoints on this as well, as we were aware after talking to a few neighbors that we received the notices, but they didn't, which is understandable based on the Planning Act. Only the adjacent landowners would have received the notices. So we did circulate the petition, and as you see with 40-something signatures, that a majority of the adjacent or neighboring properties do agree with us in objecting this, as for the reasons stated in the petition and in our emails.
Thank you, Carrie. I will now recognize Ashley Griffin. Ashley, if you could unmute yourself and state your name and your address and whether you're for or against the application. If you provided documentation, there's no need to review it, but if there's anything you want to add.
Hi, this is Ashley Griffin, and my husband is with me as well, Chris Griffin. Like our sister Carrie had said, we live at 1280 Marble Rock Road, and Chris grew up at 1259 Marble Rock Road. Carrie and I put together the petition, like she had said. A lot of the neighbors had said that they wished to have attended the council meeting. However, due to COVID and everything being online, they couldn't attend because the majority of our neighbors do not have computer access or are not tech savvy. So they said that they were going to email letters, or they put their opposition against by signing the petition. Everything that we wanted to state was in our emails and within the petition, but my husband Chris would like to say a few words.
Hello everybody, it's Chris Griffin. So I've grown up on the property. I'm a member of the community for a long time. I know Brian and used to shop at Jeff's there all the time, Blackie's. Anyways, so over the last few years, things have changed out back on the property, and I live and breathe on my property. I'm out and about all the time. A few years ago, I had a young man coming across the back of my land, and he had a couple beers on the go, and, you know, with no disregard for where he was headed. And I'd asked where he'd come from, and he'd stated he was renting a cabin at the next door property. And this kind of drew some concern. So I'd asked him a few questions, but I mean, in a friendly nature, I could see he was just out to enjoy himself. It's the same, and I like to enjoy the property as well. So I didn't give him a hard time, but I did ask him if he had been told any regards to neighboring properties or property lines to respect or of any such. And he said he was given no instruction on any guidelines, just told to come enjoy the wilderness and roam around freely. You know, I didn't have a problem with the guy, but he, you know, there should be some sort of restrictions or guidelines set in place if you're going to be, you know, doing this type of thing. She was operating this without permission, sort of under the radar at the time. I had not been aware of. There's another incident I had where I had saw someone walking on the back of my property. I went in pursuit to see who they were, which then they had evaded me with foot tracks leading back to that property in which she inhabits, whatever. I usually stick to my own property, but as far as the neighbors go, I'm, you know, in contact with Bob. We have a relationship developed, and every other neighbor I've known since I was a boy. There's a new guy that's moved in that we also have contact, and we've all developed an understanding that we get along and we all like to enjoy the property in the same sort of sense without intrusion, which this development would definitely impose and exploit what we all come to enjoy, which is peaceful now, but there's already been issues, and increasing this will only inevitably increase the issue that we see before us. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. So now I will recognize Tara Treanor, who's the applicant. If Tara would like to speak to any of the comments or to her application, and then I'll recognize any councilors that want to ask questions. Ms. Treanor, are you on the line?
Yes, thank you, I am.
Go ahead.
Well, I am very heartened to learn that my neighbors care as deeply about the environment as I do. I mean that from the bottom of my heart, honestly. And I trust the results of the Conservation Authority requested EIS will alleviate any concerns with regards to the environment. I feel though that my application didn't make clear the scale of the proposal. I just want to also speak to the map shows proposed cabin sites, not existing cabin sites. When I moved here in 2011, there was a cabin existing north of my house, but that's not part of the proposed development. The development would be contained in the mid front section of the property, specifically because I also care about privacy, and I also have agreements with certain hunters that have come every year to ask for permission to cross the back part of the property, and I've always granted it. I was never approached by Bob. Actually briefly got in touch with me, but the only question he had for me was if I lived at 4 Brock Street in Gananoque, and when I answered no, I live here, I never heard back from him. He didn't express any concerns to me, nor did the Griffins. But anyway, the cabins would be 2-person maximum cabins. This would not be a party type of cabin. They'd be catering to guests looking for privacy and solitude and certainly quiet. They would be constructed by hand and the materials would be carried in on foot. Maybe Bob's rolling his eyes because he's a builder as well, but he knows about the cabin that was recently deconstructed. That is actually how that cabin was built. Tree removal would be negligible because of that. Parking surfaces would be porous. They'd be, and it's not, they were stated as lots on the application, but they would actually be spots. This is not, some mega development. I would certainly clearly mark property boundaries. Right now, there's some fencing in places and some where it's fallen over, but I've always told guests, given them the sort of north-south boundary lines, there was a flag trail at the back, but the boardwalk is no longer passable and guests wouldn't have access to that part of the property anyways. I would encourage them towards the local hiking trails, as I've always done. Some of the letters didn't seem to realize that I live here. This is my home and I value my neighbor's privacy and quality of life, not to mention their well water, along with my own. And I would never put forward an application that threatened any of these things.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I'm going to ask for any questions or any concerns. Councillor Foley, and then I'll recognize Councillor Brown.
Well, I have a couple of questions. Number one, I'll put my first question to the planner. How many actual adjacent property owners are there?
It'll just take me a minute to pull up the map here. It appears that there are seven adjacent properties.
Okay, thank you. Can we get Chris Griffin back on line or not? Or is that difficult?
That's not proper protocol.
Okay.
Okay.
My question, Mr. Griffin alluded to the fact of no definition, I guess, between properties, and therefore this one gentleman we referred to wandered onto his property. That was fencing, is what I'm getting at. And from a previous landowner, fencing is 50-50. You're required to put up as much fence as your neighbor. Unless that's changed, I haven't ever has, then maybe just there's a little bit of blame to go around, is what I'm getting at. And with regards to all the names on this petition, that's great that they felt so inclined to sign this, but I'm wondering why. Is it just a camaraderie agreement and fellow neighbors that have been there in reference to 5 generations? And we only have 7 property owners, so why are we looking at 36 people opposing this? I can see that they're, within range. I don't know, there are a few other underlying issues here with some of the letters. Some of them are threatening to our township. If you read some of the letters that have been sent in, others are a little misleading. I mean, I don't mind dealing with facts whatsoever, but this proposal has brought out the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. It's really quite a unique concept being put in front of us here. But I have a concern being a little backpacker, being stayed in various abodes in the Adirondacks and so on. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, are there any building standards that would apply to these cabins? You can define how you want 2-person cabins. Is there any water, septic, any building code that would apply to this sort of thing? That's the first question.
I will let the planner answer that. Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair. Sorry. The cabins would be subject to the building code, and the septic systems or gray water systems would be subject to approval from the health unit as well.
Madam Chair, just to add to that, I pointed to, oh, you're looking at the pictures that were in your package that show the cabins. Yes. So they would be subject to building code requirements.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Is anything of that nature similar to a tiny home? You know, in terms of square footage or anything like that? And the reason I'm asking is I would be very concerned if someone could put up 6 buildings coming up to building code standards. That would take a fair investment. And if these are going up all at once, that would be a very strong concern on quality. And so on. So thank you. If you answered the question, it would be subject to building code standards.
Mr. Olkey, I apologize. I'll recognize Councillor Olkey if you have any questions or concerns for Ms. Treanor or the planner.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you. This may be the elephant in the room, this question, but Ms. Treanor, what would possess you to start construction of any of these things without having permits? I mean, people jump through great hoops, and I can speak from personal experience, to get permission to build on their properties. And they do consult neighbors and things beforehand, things in the sense of building codes. I get it about wilderness experience. I've had much of it myself, and I enjoy it. I get it about primitive accommodations. I've lived in many of them for extended periods, and there's an attraction for it. But for me, the fundamental issue is that you broke the bylaws intentionally from the beginning. And that makes me rather disturbed. Thank you.
Ms. Treanor, would you like to speak to that?
I would. It's not an easy situation to explain. There's a complicated relationship involved. And I know that it's my responsibility as the landowner to ensure that rules are being followed, but I didn't do that, and the cabin was actually constructed by someone else. I know that I made a mistake, and I want to make it right.
I will recognize Councillor Maybe for questions. Go ahead.
Your Worship, and through you and to anybody else who may want to answer it, please. Again, permits, we've kind of gone down that. Looks like there's only one two-story structure that may have all had a permit in its past, since that property had been up and running for probably a good 40 years, in my recollection, since I used to live fairly close to this property at one time for 22 years. So I am aware of the tree side that is there. Also, neighbors' concerns about hunting and people trespassing on their property without permission, and that needs to be dealt with if this does go through. The campground kind of scenario which this almost falls into, I know that the campground regulations are very strict in what you can and can't do and how you're dealing with the health issues of the person's site. So that's something that really needs to be looked into for fine detail. The other thing is also how you're going to deal with the campfires that people are going to have on this particular property that is very rugged. If a campfire gets out of hand, fighting a fire in this particular wilderness does become a little bit labor intensive for a fire department. I certainly would not want to see them out there handling an issue in this territory. Given that there's even abundant water close by the swampy area that is around that, would be very hard, and we'd be into a very heavy bill to look after that. So I do feel that there's some things to be looked after here, and certainly the building structures that I see, and as everybody around the table knows, I have had the opportunity to construct many buildings myself. I do question some of the ability of the buildings to withstand certain conditions that might arise in high winds, heavy snow, etc., as well as is it a 365-day operation you're going to have? Is it seasonal, just in the summer? And also with Airbnb, we do have some issues around people doing parties. And even though you're saying that there's a potential that there's 2 people per cabin, how can we look after 10 people renting 5 cabins and a gathering for a large party in the center and disrupting the peace and quiet of the neighbors' tranquility? I know out there noise does travel far. Thank you.
I will recognize Councilor Cody.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the planning department. This reference to level 2 gray water, can you explain, is that applicable, approvable on this type of application? Or was it a request with the application?
Through you, Madam Chair, this is what the applicant is proposing with their application, a Class 2 or a Class 3 gray water system that just deals with liquid waste, and that would be approved through the health unit.
Just to add to that, we're reviewing this with the health unit and with the conservation authority, and it will be part of a broader review to determine what level of treatment is actually required based on these requirements and building code compliance as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so I believe, Tara, did you want to speak, make your final comments before we wrap up the meeting?
I unfortunately missed some of what Councillor Maybe was saying when you scooted your chair sideways. It covered over his voice, but I would meet guests. I don't foresee parties being a problem because the type of guests that are looking for this type of experience, it's a unique experience, as a couple of you have acknowledged. It doesn't really attract people. There's no waterfront, there's no boating, there's nothing like that. It's very much a place where people would seek out solitude, and I don't foresee parties being an issue, but I live here, as I mentioned, and I would be meeting guests when they arrive, so I would know.
Thank you for your comments. Any further questions from the councillors before I wrap the meeting up? Seeing none, I have a motion to adjourn the planning meeting, moved by Mr. Jameson, seconded by Mr. Maybe, that the public meeting adjourn. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it carries. Thank you very much.